The dawn of any given day in New York usually brings with it the bustle of the city that never sleeps. But that August 1986, something chilling broke the routine. How could a lively park like Central Park conceal such a dark secret? What led a promising young woman to be found under such terrifying circumstances? The answer to these questions not only shook the community, but unleashed an unprecedented media firestorm. Jennifer Levin, just 18 years old, was known for her resourcefulness and determination. But her name would go down in history not for her bright future, but for the horror that surrounded her on her last day. What happened that morning took everyone's breath away. Jennifer was found unconscious in a corner of the park, setting off an investigation that would expose the deepest cracks in the society of the time. Jennifer was no ordinary young woman. From a wealthy Port Washington family, she stood out for her academic brilliance and personal charm. After moving in with her father, a well-known real estate agent in Soho, Jennifer attended a prestigious private school where she quickly gained respect. Her friends were children of wealthy families, and her social life took place in the heart of New York, between meetings and exclusive events. It was in this environment that she met Robert Chambers, a young man who claimed to be the son of a wealthy family with connections in the country club world. What began as a casual glance turned into a romance that marked the last months of her life. On the eve of starting a new stage in college, Jennifer attended what would be her last social gathering. The next morning, on August 26, 1986, her body was discovered by a bicyclist riding through Central Park. The scene left everyone in shock. This case, from its unexpected twists and turns to the questionable media handling, laid bare how prejudice and the power of public influence could shape an investigation. But this was only the beginning. What more secrets might lurk behind the shadows of that fateful day? Chaos on the streets of New York in the mid-1980s was nothing new, but public pressure over the Jennifer Levin case led investigators to work under unprecedented scrutiny. Initial clues pointed to something more calculated than a simple attack in the park. The scene appeared carefully orchestrated, and early forensic testing revealed that there were no traces of third parties, further complicating initial theories. The discovery of clothing at a considerable distance from the body and the strange position in which Jennifer was found led investigators to believe there was a deliberate attempt to cover up what had happened. As the news circulated and media pressure mounted, authorities focused their efforts on unraveling Jennifer's last night. It was thanks to the diary submitted by her father, Steve Levin, that the events leading up to the tragedy could be reconstructed more accurately. The diary revealed plans with girlfriends and a casual mention of her ex-boyfriend, Dorian. This led investigators to seek out the latter, who had been present at the bar where Jennifer spent her final hours. Dorian described how they briefly crossed paths and confirmed that he left the place before anything strange happened. However, it was not his account that changed the course of the investigation, but that of Robert Chambers, the last man to be with Jennifer. Robert's appearance when brought to the police station did not go unnoticed. The fresh scratches on his face raised immediate suspicion, but his excuse was as implausible as it was baffling. He said a cat had attacked him. Despite his initial willingness to cooperate, his answers were evasive and did not square with the facts gathered. According to Robert, he had gone out with Jennifer after the party around 4 a.m. He stated that, after saying goodbye to Jennifer, he said that he had been in the house with her. He testified that after saying goodbye, the two went their separate ways, but he could not explain the scratches or why other witnesses claimed to have seen them together moments before the crime. The marks on her face were consistent with an attempt at self-defense, which left little doubt in the minds of investigators. As the pieces began to fall into place, new questions arose. What else was Robert hiding? How far would he go to protect his version of events? The investigation was just beginning, but the indications were that the truth would be even more disturbing. The atmosphere of tension in the police station grew as the hours wore on. Robert Chambers' words, initially presented as a confession, soon fell apart under the scrutiny of the investigators. The narrative of an accident seemed more like an elaborate script than a sincere account. The detectives could not ignore the inconsistent details that emerged in their version of events. Meanwhile, outside, the media attention was reaching a fever pitch. The streets in front of the police station were filled with reporters scrambling to capture any new information. Jennifer's devastated friends and family watched as their loved one's image was swept away in a relentless media spectacle. Robert's defense, led by astute attorney Jack Littman, began to unfold with surgical precision. Littman not only set about protecting his client's image, but led a direct attack on Jennifer. The lawyer's strategies included insinuations about her private life, irrelevant details that were manipulated to sow doubts in public opinion. It was a low blow that sparked outrage among those who knew Jennifer and remembered her as a young woman with a bright future. The impact of this strategy was not limited to newspaper headlines. Robert's carefully orchestrated public appearances, dressed in impeccable elegance, made him a polarizing figure. While some media portrayed him as the perfect guy caught in an unfortunate situation, others questioned the lack of solid evidence to back up his statements. Robert's public image was further reinforced by interviews in which he adopted a serene and charismatic attitude. The contrast with the Jennifer described by her lawyer as problematic and provocative further divided New York society. The perception of young women as responsible for their personal tragedies was a dangerously common discourse at the time, and this case clearly evidenced it. However, behind the glamour of headlines and magazine covers, investigators continued their hard work. They meticulously reconstructed Jennifer's last moments, searching for evidence to disprove Robert's claims. The marks on her face, the crime scene, and witness accounts did not match the version of events presented by the defense. Despite this, the weight of public opinion seemed to be tipping the scales in Robert's favor. The Levin family, facing unimaginable pain, had to endure not only the loss of Jennifer, but also the outrage of having their memory distorted in an attempt to save their assailant. What was once a promising career path to a bright future became a battleground where the truth struggled to come to light. As the court prepared for one of the most anticipated trials in New York, tensions peaked. The media environment was saturated with speculation and debate, as details of Robert Chambers' dark past began to leak out more consistently. Revelations about his illegal activities and substance dependency not only challenged the polished image his defense had attempted to build, but also added considerable weight to the allegations against him. The process of selecting an impartial jury proved to be a monumental task. Each new candidate brought with them already formed opinions, influenced by months of media coverage and polarizing theories. It was clear that the case had transcended the boundaries of the judicial system and had become a cultural phenomenon. Prosecutors understood that they were facing not only a defendant, but also a carefully crafted defense narrative. For their part, the prosecution team focused their efforts on dismantling the facade of innocence built around Robert. They sought out witnesses who could bring clarity to the events of that night and provide further context about the defendant's character. One of the key players was a friend of Jennifer's, who shared disturbing details about Robert's increasingly erratic behaviors in the days leading up to the incident. This friend recalled a conversation with Jennifer in which she expressed her doubts about continuing her relationship with Robert due to his personal problems and aggressive attitudes. According to the witness, Jennifer had noticed disturbing changes in him, from angry outbursts to unexplained disappearances of money and valuables. These statements seemed to fit with the theory that Robert had planned to meet Jennifer that night to resolve issues he perceived as threatening. At trial, a key piece was presented: a necklace Jennifer was wearing the night of her death, later found in an underground market linked to buyers of stolen goods. The connection between this find and Robert's history with burglaries did not go unnoticed by prosecutors. The evidence was beginning to trace a clear pattern of behavior that completely contradicted the image of a perfect young man projected by the defense. As the trial progressed, the jurors were confronted with a case rife with emotions, speculation, and shadowy details that defied any simple conclusions. One thing was undeniable, however. Beneath the veneer of public sympathy and support for Robert, there was a much darker and more complex story still seeking to be fully revealed. The final sentence marked the end of the judicial process, but not the closing of the chapter for those who had been involved. As Robert Chambers served his sentence, Jennifer Levin's parents faced a silent battle, trying to reclaim their daughter's legacy in a world that had reduced her to a sensational headline. Despite the civil judgment in their favor, the Levin family understood that the real value was not in financial compensation, but in restoring Jennifer's dignity and honoring her memory. During his time in prison, Robert not only accumulated disciplinary problems, but also became a symbol of how the media narrative could shape public perception of a case. His years as an inmate were marked by scandals, from his involvement in internal smuggling rings to violent confrontations with other inmates. Each incident reinforced the image of a man incapable of redeeming himself, complicating any attempt at early parole. Meanwhile, on the outside, the Levin family dedicated itself to creating a fund in Jennifer's honor, designed to support victims of violence and educate about the dangers of media manipulation. This effort not only sought to give purpose to her loss, but also to challenge the narrative that had, for so long, demonized the victim while glorifying the perpetrator. The New York community, though divided in the past, began to coalesce around these initiatives, questioning the values and priorities that had allowed this case to become a media spectacle. When Robert was finally released in 2003, his reintegration into society was far from smooth. The media, which had once protected him with indulgent headlines, waited for him outside the prison gates. Cameras captured a visibly aging man, with a look that reflected both defiance and resignation. Although he tried to keep a low profile, his name remained synonymous with controversy, and any attempt to rebuild his life was overshadowed by his past. In the time following his release, Robert was seen on several occasions in public places, but always avoided interacting with the media. The few interviews he gave were carefully controlled, avoiding any details that might contradict the version he had presented during the trial. Despite his attempts to show remorse, the actions of the past continued to haunt him, and his name remained a painful reminder to those who knew Jennifer Levin, and to a city that would never forget the case that had shocked it. Robert Chambers' life after his release reflected a cycle of destructive decisions that seemed impossible to break. His inability to adapt to a society that had radically changed during his time in prison led him to seek refuge in the same habits that had defined him in his youth. Although in interviews he declared his intention to redeem himself, his actions proved otherwise. In the first few years after his release from prison, Robert attempted to establish a life away from the public eye. He moved into a modest apartment in New York and got temporary jobs in sectors that did not require impeccable backgrounds. However, his addiction problems quickly resurfaced. Reports of illicit activities began to accumulate, first as rumors and then as verifiable facts, culminating in his arrest in 2007. The crime scene, an apartment of an acquaintance in Manhattan, reflected the desperation of a man who seemed unable to free himself from his past. Meanwhile, Ellen Levin, Jennifer's mother, continued her struggle to transform her pain into action. Her tireless work to improve victim protection laws made her a prominent figure in social activism circles. Her efforts resulted not only in legislative changes, but also in a greater focus on the importance of preserving the dignity of victims in media cases. Ellen led initiatives to educate younger generations about the risks of substance abuse and interpersonal violence, a legacy she considered essential to honoring her daughter's memory. In the prison environment, Robert was accumulating new histories of confrontation. His erratic behavior placed him at the center of conflicts with other inmates, some of which involved disputes over contraband. These situations further complicated his eligibility for parole, and his prison time was extended as he became an emblematic case of recidivism. The media was quick to pick up the story of his re-imprisonment, and comparisons between his crimes became the central theme. Discussions centered on how a drug and theft-related crime could result in a more severe sentence than the loss of life. This generated a public debate about the priorities of the justice system, which seemed to overlook the weight of Jennifer's tragedy in favor of pursuing more tangible and current crimes. By 2024, with his possible release on the horizon, opinions about Robert Chambers remained divided. Some saw him as a man who had squandered every opportunity to redeem himself, while others held out hope that he might finally change. What was certain was that Jennifer Levin's story and the impact of her death continued to resonate in a society seeking to learn from its mistakes as it struggled to balance justice and compassion in a complex and ever-changing world.